Hello, operator, give me the number for 911.
When Homer says it, it's funny, but it just might be a valid question. Find out next on the E911 Talk podcast, episode 230, recorded Wednesday, December 31st, 2014, right here on APN, the Avaya Podcast Network. According to the Internet Engineering Task Force, or IATF, the numbers that are officially recognized and should be valid everywhere for emergency calling are 911 and 112. Now, while many other numbers and emergency codes still exist in some countries, sometimes for specific services like police, fire, and medical, for the most part, emergency services are moving to 911 or 112 as the officially supported number. Here in the United States, the Federal Communications Commission has deemed that 911 is the official emergency number, and it's recognized by the National Emergency Number Association. With cellular telephone calls becoming the origination source for 60 to, in some cases, 70% of the 911 calls in some areas, and a certain phenomenon with some cellular carriers, as well as the technology they use to deliver the service, there's been some growth in urban legends. Now, I really enjoy reading the stories that come up every once in a while on the internet and the wild imaginations of some people who really have no qualifications in the industry at all that try to explain this phenomenon and flex their technical muscles. I myself had an opinion on this and considered myself somewhat knowledgeable in the area, but even I learned something after going to the real experts who were the carriers themselves. Now, we're all used to dialing telephones, and that puts our brains down a specific path of thinking. When I dial a number on a cellular phone, I make the assumption that what I dial is sent to the carrier. And this is the first anomaly, including myself, that people don't know about. As it turns out, on CDMA-type handsets, such as those used by Sprint and Verizon wireless networks, this may actually be the case. But if you're using a GSM or UMTS cellular device, such as the types provided by AT&T Mobility, these devices don't really dial anything, including 911, or any other emergency number for that fact. You see, GSM UMTS units being a global standard, the devices recognize several known emergency numbers, including 911, 112, and 999 as the most popular ones, but they also recognize some of the more obscure numbers like 118 as an emergency call. Now, once a GSM UMTS cellular phone detects a call to an emergency number, what it does is inform the network that it's handling an emergency call. At that point, the call is in the network and it's treated like any other emergency call where the location is determined and the call is then handed off to the public switch telephone network 911 network. That's where 911 comes into play, and the call arrives at the PSAP with normal Phase 1, Phase 2 cellular location. And at that point, the 911 call taker does their job like every other call. So what are the common myths? Well, the most common one I hear is that if you're being pulled over late at night on a dark road and you're unsure about the identity of the person that's pulling you over, you can dial 112 to reach the police and inform them that you're concerned about your safety. Now, the problem here is that while 112 may connect you with public safety, in reality, it's nothing more than dialing 911, and there's no indication to the call taker that you've dialed anything other than that. Another common rumor here in the States is that 999 can be dialed to reach the police for non-emergencies. And again, while dialing 999 may actually get you to public safety, it certainly doesn't provide you with anything different than dialing 911 would. Now, while we're talking about other numbers, there are other N11 services that are available, and this is probably a great time to review those, and you can make sure that they can be dialed from your corporate telephone system, as they're often forgot by the installation technicians. 211 is reserved for health organizations. 311 will get you to local government. 411 has been reserved for telephone information services. 511 is for highway and road information. 611 will get you telephone repair service in most areas. And an important one is 711, which gives you TDD, TTY services for the deaf or hearing impaired. Another important one is 811, which is the National Call Before You Dig number. Knowing where those buried power and gas lines are could actually prevent a 911 call, which is the official emergency number in the United States. I hope that list helps you out, and remember, not all of those numbers are active in all areas, but it's a good list to have. I'd like to thank Alan Muse from the Public Safety Group at AT&T Mobility, who provided the information on 112 and other emergency codes in the wireless world. And it just goes to show you that getting the right information is easy as finding the right person to provide it. Thanks again, Alan. So as we wrap up 2014, I want to thank everyone who supported us through this past year. And I'm talking about the support we received from Avaya CEO Kevin Kennedy, Senior Vice President of Worldwide Sales and President of Global Field Operations, Pierre-Paul Allard, Avaya's CTO, Laurent Filonenko, and of course, Jean Turgeon, or JT, Avaya's Vice President of SDN and Chief Technologist, who's also the Executive Producer of APN. Keeping APN running behind the scenes is APN producer Guadalupe Ugani in Miami, and of course our crack social media team out in the West Coast, Ashley Fairless, Jamie Schember, Luke Stengel, and Andy Steinmetz under Jeremiah Gladavesa, who provided us with great support for APN this past year. For the Avaya Podcast Network, this is Fletch. Have a safe, happy new year, and we'll see you back in 2015, bigger and better than ever, right here on APN, the Avaya Podcast Network. Take it away, Spider.
The preceding podcast has been brought to you by the Avaya Podcast Network. Executive producer Jean Turgeon, a.k.a. JT. Producer and Lot 10 correspondent Guadalupe Ugani. Our program and creative director is Fletch. And the APN legal correspondent is attorney Martha Beyer. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Avaya_APN. And visit Avaya.com/APN on the web, where you can download all of our content. For the Avaya Podcast Network, this is Spider Harrison, the official voice dude of APN.
The preceding content is copyright 2014 by the Avaya Podcast Network. Broadcast or retransmission is permitted with attribution. Your actual mileage may vary. Batteries are not included. I'm a professional announcer on a closed course. Do not try this at home.